better or worse than the other. An interesting story about eBay as a quick aside, eBay actually raised venture capital and then never spent it. They were making so much money in the early days of eBay that even though they got all this money in from the venture capitalists, they never had a need to spend that money. So that's kind of the rare exception. Very, very rarely will you find an example like that. So then the question is, well, if you are going to raise money, how much do you raise? And I think that what my sense is, and in terms of talking to entrepreneurs, is it really makes sense to either go big or don't go. So if you're going to raise money, you probably want to raise more than you think you need to. Oftentimes people will come and they'll say, I'm thinking about raising $50,000 or $100,000. It's a very common thing an entrepreneur will do at first because they look at their costs and they're $50,000, I can get this off the ground. Well, the thing about it is raising $50,000 is really not that much more difficult than raising $500,000. You still have to write up the legal docs. You still have to go out and pitch it to investors. You still have to do a lot of different things. And oftentimes what you'll find is it is more difficult to raise $500,000 than $50,000, obviously, but it's not 10x more difficult. I guess that's what my point there is, that what you really want to try to do is figure out, if you're going to raise money, how much will get you a significant ways down the road. Oftentimes people will say, to me or to other people, they'll say, I think I can get, 6 months down the road on $50,000. So therefore I'm going to try to raise $50,000, quit my job and run the company for 6 months. That's something that's really hard to do, because oftentimes if you think you need 50,000, you really need like 150,000. And 6 months where you think you'll be, you probably won't be there. That's been my experience as an entrepreneur. And so I always tell people, if you're thinking about raising, 50, raise 150. If you think about raising 150, raise 450. Double, triple, quadruple the amount you're going to raise, because ultimately you're going to need more time to get your product to market, to get people buying your product, and also, things are going to cost more than you think they're going to cost. I mean, little things that you think, aren't going to be very expensive, they tend to add up when you're running a business. So, I'm a big fan of running companies as lean as possible, but at the same time, if you are going to go through the energy and the effort of going out and raising capital, then I think it's really important to make sure that you raise enough to get you pretty far down the road. And Mark Andreessen, who again I would absolutely recommend devouring his blog, he's written recently a lot about this, and he actually wrote about it about a year and a half ago. And a year and a half ago, it was fairly easy still to get money, to raise money from investors. It's different now. Things have tightened up a lot with the credit markets and everything. And his advice about a year and a half ago was go out and raise as much as you can, because you're going to need it, because we're going to go through some sort of a nuclear winter, and you want to make sure that you're not running out of cash when that's the case. So that was very prescient advice on the part of Mark, and some entrepreneurs certainly took him up on that and raised really large war chests during that time. And if you raise a lot of money when times are good and then times turn south, that actually could work to your advantage, because then you have the opportunity to go out and acquire companies. There's a lot more talented workers who are looking for jobs. And when you look at some of the biggest companies, indeed, they were built during downturns. When you look at when Google was built, it was in 2001 and 2002 when nothing was happening in Silicon Valley. When you look at when Apple and Microsoft were started, it was in the middle of the 70s. It was 1975 when the economy was really fairly similar to where it is right now. So one of the reasons I bring that up is I really feel like now is probably about the best time to start a business. There are ebbs and flows. There are 3, 4, 5-year cycles in the economy. And if you start a company when you're on the downside, when you're in a place where we are now, assuming that it's not going to get a lot worse, but we don't know. If you start a company kind of on the down part of that, in the trough, then it really takes oftentimes 3, 4, 5 years to really get a company going. And by the time you're in that peak period, you also align with where the market is, with where the economy is. So if you had started a company like Google did in 1999, they got a lot of their traction when no one was really paying attention to the web in 2001 and 2002, and then they were, by the time 2004, 2005 came around, people were like, wow, you know what, like things are picking up. Google's out there going public because they've built themselves up during a period where times are tough. There is a good article that I'll post a link to here at the end of class that was talking about the guy who started Siebel Systems, and he was talking about how frugal he was in the early days of his office was his desk was a folding table. He bought office in Silicon Valley for 11 cents a square foot, which if you have any idea what real estate costs in Silicon Valley, it's ridiculously cheap. And he was able to take advantage of the fact that he was building a company in a time when the economy wasn't super hot. So look at times like this as an opportunity more than a challenge, because it's something that during times like this, a lot of people say, I couldn't start a company, the economy's bad. It's really the flip side, which is the economy is bad, then it's probably a good time to start a company. So that's my take on it. One book that I'll recommend here, and it's also in your handout at the end of class, is the Sam Wiley book, $1,000 and an Idea. Sam Wiley started a number of companies. It's a fascinating read. I highly recommend reading stories of entrepreneurs, and Sam's in particular is great because he talks a lot about fundraising in the book. So I wanted to mention that on this slide. Lesson number 8 is network. So this might be, as an entrepreneur, the most important thing you can do. Now, I mentioned product market fit before, and Andreessen's thing is that's the only thing that matters, and I definitely agree with that. But oftentimes with product market fit, you're not in full control of that. You can build a really good product and just the market timing isn't right. Networking is something that you do have more control over. I'm a firm believer that anybody with enough effort can build a really substantial network. There's a few different principles of networking that I highly recommend to entrepreneurs. I'll talk about those in a second, but first, talking about why networking is important. So some of the reasons are very obvious, but things like, raising money. You're typically going to raise your first round of financing from friends and family. The bigger your network, the more people you can reach out to raise money from. Thinking about hires. So if you're looking to hire people, the best hires typically, you don't find them on job boards. Now, we've actually got one of our guys from a job board. He's fantastic. But oftentimes, the best hires come from knowing somebody. They come from, so-and-so knows so-and-so, and you should talk to them about, a position. So if you have a larger network, you're much more likely to be able to tap into the best talent that's out there. Networks are great sources of ideas, to be able to go out to lunch with someone who's smart and bounce your idea off them, someone who's supportive, someone you don't have to worry about stealing your idea. That's fantastic. That's a great opportunity. I've benefited tremendously, and I'm very thankful for all the people who I've been able to talk to EduFire about, all the people who've contributed ideas. Literally hundreds of people have contributed ideas to EduFire, and that's not even counting all the people on our site who've come and put stuff in the ideas board. So the notion of having a large network really helps for so many different reasons. Keith Ferrazzi is the guy who wrote Never Eat Alone. I'll talk about that in a second. So a few things about building a network that I think are really important. The first thing is give before you get. So there are really two different approaches to networking in the world. One is basically a scarcity mentality of, I want to try to get as much as possible, and if I don't get something and someone else does, or if I get something that means someone else can't have it. The other mentality is the abundance mentality, which is that I can actually help people quite a bit. And not only is that going to be better for them, but it's actually going to be better for me as well. So my approach to networking, and the most successful people that I've seen who are good networkers, is to really look at how can you help somebody. So if there's someone that you want to reach out to, someone that you think would be helpful to you, don't start there. Don't start with what you can get from them, but start by what can you give to that person. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to be a connector. So one of the best ways to build a network is to introduce other people. So I learned this from mostly a lot from Brian, who I worked with at Zodds, and Brian would always do these fantastic email introductions and say, you two people need to meet. Just friend meet friend, or Steve meet Tom, Tom meet Steve, and connect them via email. And the first time I saw him do that, I was 27, 28 years old, so 4 or 5 years ago. I'd never seen anyone do that before. I didn't know what that was. It took me 27 years to learn how to do that. But now I find myself doing that probably 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 times a week for people. Nothing really is more fun for me than sitting down and cranking out 5 to 10 introductions for people that I think could help each other out that I know in my network. And by doing that, what's amazing about that is it's really benefited me personally. Now, that wasn't why I did it. I just get a lot of personal pleasure out of connecting people, but it's allowed me to build a larger network as well. So, that's something that you can do, very easy to do. Find 2 people that are in your network who you think could benefit from knowing each other, could help each other out. Just connect them via email. It's really easy to do. One of the best uses of your time. And then the third thing is to use social media wisely. So social media, it's amazing. Like you look at LinkedIn, you look at Facebook, you look at Twitter, and the ability to connect to people using these social networks is unprecedented. Like we literally are at this point in human history. No one's had this opportunity before. I'll tell you a quick story about this. I about